of when we present or when we interact with the public, the consciousness of the kind of cultural context, sensibility to the particular dynamic of the place is very much should be taken into consideration. And I think that brings me also to the thinking, and I would like to discuss with the panelists here, that the idea of the people involved in public art. Because when we talk about art, primarily, I think the idea that why do we want to bring art to the public in the first place, who this kind of gesture is for, and what kind of impact or what kind of messages do we expect to generate through this kind of gesture of staging something in the public. Obviously, the people that will encounter the work, that will have access to the work, are very much part of the landscape that we are considering when we are working with public art. But in the meantime, they are always on the receiving end. Like, do the public ever have a say, or can they contribute to how public art is being kind of presented and is being produced? What's the role of the public, the people, the actually individuals in terms of public art? Maybe we can go with from Chris, and then we go this order.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I have to say we in Switzerland deal with a very democratic mode in those things. So when we spend public money, so tax money, we have to go through a whole process which is completely regulated, and at the end it could be that we have a votation on an artwork. We had that a couple of years ago with a Thomas Demand piece, and that's always very complicated when you have to explain to the people, to the general population of a town, what contemporary art is. And from the very beginning, it was clear to me that this is going to be a tough thing, you know. But we lost the votation, so the project was not realized. But I was a little sad, but I was also happy because during that public discussion, we finally could also establish a dialogue between the population and the artwork, sort of. So this project became, instead of not being realized, became part of the public consciousness of what contemporary art today is and what it could be. So it is a hypothetical project, but it became completely public.
So the discussion, the interaction was very much part of what came out of this initiative too.
Yeah, we did not intend to, you know, we just wanted to build the sculpture, or it was a hybrid between a sculpture and architecture and a restaurant and a toilet, and we have very conservative politicians in Switzerland too, and they made a campaign out of that. So the art part was only 100,000 Swiss francs, but the whole project was about 6 million. So what they made out of it is like, it's an artwork for 6 million, you know. But it was interesting for me. It was quite a strong experience, and we had to also to face the fact that spending money from the population for the population means also that we have to involve the population at a very early stage in order to make them understand why they give the money for an artwork.
On that note, can I actually ask you to add a little bit about the history of your institution? Because it's, of all the panelists here, you are the one who actually work in an institution that specifically deal with art in public space. So how was the institution formed in the first place? What's the history?
The very beginning of it was a research project at the university. So it was connected to the question, how can art be involved in the city development? So, you must know that Zurich was a shrinking city during almost 50 years after the Second World War. So it had around 450,000 people. That's nothing compared to China, but it's the largest, by far the largest city in Switzerland in 1945. Then it went down to 340,000. And they had many problems in town during the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Tax problems, drug problems, etc. And after they decided to reshape the whole industrial complex and to make it accessible to housing programs, the city became very, very attractive again. And now we have about 440,000 people almost. So you see, it's a growing city, and with that city development process, we started to think about what role can art play in that. You know, that was the starting point of that research project, and at the end, in 2006, that institution, public art program, the city of Zurich, was founded, and still then we are active and working very much on communication, very much on, well, involving people in our programs.
Thank you. Claire, would you like to respond to the question that I have asked? But I'm also curious that the fact that you have changed the context of where you work from initially in Europe and now to Hong Kong in particular, how does that working context affect your kind of perception of working in the public and working with art in the public?
I mean, I definitely echoes Phil's sentiment about, you know, public institutions, now thinking about public institutions and how they can operate. I think PartⅡ for me as an organization shared a lot of similarities to some of my interests in public art in a way, in that it's an institution that's very grounded in the local community, but it also has a critical kind of it operates as a critical platform for both the arts community, but also a wider public. So I think now in Hong Kong, this is something I'm thinking about a lot, and I think in terms of the question about public, I think one of the things in my experience of working with public art is, in addition to trying to find a way of engaging with and representing a public within a project, you also have a number of different stakeholders that are really invested in the space. I think, I mean, at least with this project we did with the Olympics, I think ultimately we were dealing with the mayor's office, the transportation system, the various museums, the residency organizations, and each of these different stakeholders has different aims and views about what should happen in these spaces. And I think it's a real challenge when you're working with public art to figure out how to bring all of these things together and still do something that is productive and not compromised by all of these different needs.
Thanks. Daniel, do you have something to add to this question?
So maybe, I think one thing that is interesting is that public art makes, or art in public space makes public space accessible, so it makes space public. A bit like an institution makes also space public. And I think that there's a great potential in that. And the second thing, there has been that big shift, what you also were talking about, you know, of a relationship, the public in front of the sculpture, which is a very passive relationship. And that's, I would say, the case in most of public art. And I personally am a bit critical about this. I find it actually quite boring. And also, I think the cities are densely built, so we don't need other objects, more objects into that public space. I think that the art should activate the space and activate the public, and that's enough. And maybe it's not even visible, the art, but maybe it's just an experience. So I think that's something I'm interested in.
Is that a challenge, though, when you communicate that kind of expectation to an artist to kind of produce a project specifically for a location and with an expectation that that project would kind of activate that space. Is that expectation often a challenge to artists that you work with so far?
I think you choose the artists according to ideas you have. So you choose somebody because they already have this practice anyway. So that makes it easier. But I would run a project in Art and Public Space in Basel, and at a certain moment I saw, okay, we have done wall paintings, we have done this and that, and I said to my board, okay, let's just open an art space. Because what we need in this neighborhood is not art, we need life. So then we opened this, for young artists, a space, an exhibition space, and gave the money to these artists to run an exhibition space instead of installing art into the city. And that brought indeed people back to the neighborhood. I think that was such a switch. And I think, as Phil said, it's very much about specificity, about context. And each city, each country has very different histories, demands, situations. So it's hard to generalize. I think it's better just to look closely like he did. Okay, that's a neighborhood, they could need or that, this or that, than saying we should do this or that. It's just each case is different.
Liu Wei, maybe I can ask you about the reception of your works in public. When you were showing us a few of the projects that you have done in public spaces, what were the receptions? How were they different from how you would have staged the work indoor in an exhibition space, in a regular exhibition space?
其实这个公共艺术，对于我来说，其实这个也是一个非常困难的事儿。就是我首先从我的角度来讲，我首先不知道我在一个公共空间当中应该做一个什么样的东西，什么样的形式来呈现，能够介入到一个现实生活中，然后能够让大众能够去接受它。但是我觉得从最简单的一个层面上说，对我来说，我觉得起码是一个不一样的东西，而不是一个标准的东西。我们广场必须有个雕塑，我觉得有个雕塑，这个你看你从哪个角度来谈，但是真正来谈，我觉得这个标准的一个设置，说是没有感觉的，就是没有意义的。就说我哪怕是一个所有观众他所不能接受，对于我来说是可以的，因为起码可以让公众能够知道还有另外一个世界，也许能引起他思考或者这样。但是这个形式非常，就是对我来说最重要的。我每次在想这个，无论我做作品也好，还是做公共项目也好，就我越来越多的对公共项目感兴趣，因为这是我本身创作的艺术创作也是要更新的，因为我们所有的这个当代艺术，我们必须跟当代是介入到这个现实生活中，介入到这个当代的进程当中，对这个东西思考。所以呢，我也会想这个问题，但是我在想这个是应该以什么形式，它会有什么功能的问题。主要对我来说，公共艺术也许可能是一个声音的，也许是人的。对，我会想到一个古希腊的一个广场的一个状态，在那个广场里面，我想到的是人，我觉得人才是公共艺术，因为他们对于身体、对于宇宙的认知、对于身体，他们在讲体热的问题，身体热了，他们才有更大的活力，才有力量，才美。然后他关于美是这样，所以他们所有人都赤裸的身体在这个公共场域里。就在我们当下这个时候，公共艺术对我来也是这样，就说我们也看到有声音的装置，然后声音的，比如在 Highline 上有一个他们做的一个放了不同的声音、不同的音乐就是整个混杂在一起，就像很多人在很操作变成一个很嘈杂的声音，然后它是在一个很长的一个，我觉得这个东西它就是更能够介入对一个现实生活有一个真正的介入，包括一些行为，包括因为有时候看不像前他在街上跳舞的一个行为，我觉得那个也是一个非常有意思的，对现实有影响。所以我觉得对于我来说，就是公共艺术，可以不是一个凝固的东西，就是可以是一个流动的，因为对于一个公共的空间，公共的一个大众来说，我觉得更多的是能够让他们对生活有个思考，除了他们 正常的对工作、对于生存的思考，是活下去的思考以外，还可以有其他的一个思考。我觉得工艺术对我来说，它必须有这样的功能。
Thanks. Phil, like you, I'm also running an institution in China, and one of the kind of constant challenges I have to face is actually that the kind of art that's being presented to the public is not public enough. And often that means that it's not, it's too specialized, it's too conceptual, it's not accessible in terms of the visual language or in terms of how the work can be understood. And for me, that really kind of complicates the experience of thinking about the public, because ultimately the public consists of so many different people, and there are very kind of diverse backgrounds of the public. So I would like to ask you, in terms of working in the institution in China, is there any challenge in terms of kind of imagining that public and speaking to that public in your work?
Yes, I mean, it's a very interesting challenge, because everything you said is completely true, and I think it's. And yet you also don't want to make the opposite mistake, which is to condescend to your viewership, right? And so, I think we look for the kinds of projects and the kinds of exhibitions and the kinds of works that can, hopefully by some sort of innate power, at least create the possibility of an experience that can be sensed, if not entirely comprehended immediately. We do all kinds of things to try and create channels of understanding, whether that's through live humans or through various digital technologies. And I think we also just have to think a lot about the diversity of a program. And I don't mean just in terms of the ethnic or gender makeup of the artists it includes, but I mean, a lot of people were saying, well, it's sort of funny that you have this big photo show on now, and everyone's coming from all over the world to see, Beijing. And then my response is kind of, this has actually been a really, really revelatory show for us, because for the first time in at least a few years, I mean, really that I can remember, you have an exhibition where the first question is not, what does it mean, or I don't understand that, but instead, because of the specific nature of that medium, to which people have this kind of daily relationship through their smartphones, there's another kind of angle that's up that people begin to engage, in a new kind of way. So I don't think there's ever an answer that will be universally applicable, but I do think it more and more it sort of drives our thinking about what we do, because people are consistently coming away from this place or from whichever place, without feeling as if they've been confused or led not to a place of greater understanding or awareness. And that kind of means we're not. We have things about our own jobs that we can improve. So it's I would say it's definitely become and yet at the same time, I don't believe that the answer is that we all go to certain kinds of immersive, highly branded, immediately recognizable, easily consumed programming. Right? I mean, I don't want to name names, but you kind of know what I'm probably sort of getting at, and I think that there's a balance that we've kind of constantly looking for.
That's very helpful. Before I open the floor before I open the panel to the floor, maybe I would like to pose my kind of last question to all my panelists. In China, in particular, when we think about public art, there was a kind of certain hesitation, because historically in the 1940s, art for the people was very much used as a front or a kind of agenda to instrumentalize art, to mobilize art, to mobilize the public politically for a certain political agenda. Whereas today, I also see that there is a certain kind of urgency to go back to this notion of kind of emancipating the public again, because the public domain, whether it's in Europe or in China, has become so much kind of constrained because of the kind of rise of conservative politics. And so I would like to kind of ask all of you this question, that what can kind of public art hopefully open up or generate at this moment in time in history? Maybe we can go this way now. Or anyone can jump in if you have anything to respond. The kind of urgency of not necessarily using public art, but instead the potential in kind of generating public discourse.
So maybe I can add one thing to that, also what Phil just said. So I think it's a place, the public space and the museum is a place where art can empower people. And I do, my experience at Kunsthalle Zurich is that there are actually a lot more interested people out there, but that we don't get them in. Because we're perceived as arrogant, or we're perceived as hermetic, or totally not understandable. So one tool now that we started is Céline Fulger, one of my of the educational team, came to me and said, it was her master's thesis, can I do the master's thesis with you, Kunsthalle, during my job? And I said, yeah, what is it? So she started this text messaging thing. So when you get into the exhibition, it says, do you have any questions about the exhibition? If so, text us. So people start texting us and asking questions. And that, it builds a public, it also builds a public space, because we then post these questions online on the blog, also print them out and put them at the entrance so people can read the questions of other people and learn from their questions. So I think that there's a lot of stuff to be done. It's just, yeah, we have to have people with good ideas. Yeah. And sometimes it's artists, sometimes it's the public themselves, sometimes it's employees.